So welcome to another edition of 5 Minutes with Bo Hanson, and today I thought it might be useful, given that we're coming towards the end of November and into December and the final part of the year, that we take a moment to reflect on some of the experiences that we've had throughout season 2017. Recently, through not just the work that we've been doing with a range of our clients across a number of different sports, but also we've been travelling around Australia doing two specific programs. One has been the Team Culture Workshop, where we've been talking about how to develop a more effective team culture and what that actually looks and sounds like, and also the Athlete Tough Workshop, which many of you are using as part of your program and hopefully getting a lot out of as well. One of the stories I wanted to tell you a little bit about contains the topic of reframing. And one of the workshops where it was really interesting, we had a player who was a former footballer and won the championship with one of our coaches who we obviously look up to, don't work with them, but see them as a mentor and a role model. And the other was a team who had just lost the championship. And they both described what it was like at the halftime break. And it was quite interesting because the gap between these two performances is something like 7 years apart. And the retired player spoke about the fact that we came off at halftime. We just experienced the worst half of football we played the entire season. And our coach sat us down and we all sat there and we looked up to him, listening and waiting for words of wisdom. And he simply said, "That's not the team I coached all year. Where are you guys? This is not the team that I coached during the entirety of the year. It's not the identity that you have as a team. And unless you find yourselves, I think you're going to be in some issues. So your job is to find yourselves and to get out there and do something different. So rediscover who you are." That's all I got to say about that. Now, the other team came off in a similar position, down by only a few points, could easily have turned the game around at the half-point way, and essentially came off, and the coaches tried to motivate the players. The players were despondent, their body language was poor, and in the locker room it was as if something tragic had happened. But the reality is that both these teams were in the same position. One coach challenged the team to find themselves. The other coaching staff suggested that they needed to motivate and reinvigorate and reignite this team. The first team went back out there after having had a discussion led by the leadership group of the team, of which the player who's now retired, obviously, was on our course, and said, "Look, we took charge of the situation." We said, "Look, we've just played the worst half of football that we've played for the entire year, and we're only down by 2 points. How good is that? The other team can't possibly play any better. We have massive upside. This is the grand final, the championship game, and we're only down by 2, having played the worst we can possibly play. Things are going to get better and we're going to do a better job." So they talked about what they needed to change and improve, and they went out there with a newly inspired sense of invigoration and energy and enthusiasm for being the team that they'd been all year. They went on to win that game by, I think, 10 points and won the championship that year, the first time that club had won it for many, many years. The second team who competed this year, unfortunately for them, they went out of that locker room in the same negative frame of mind, thinking negatively about the fact that we aren't in a winning position, having been in this position all year where we've been on top of all of the opposition teams, and they didn't turn it around, and they didn't just go on to lose that game, but they lost significantly. And from my perspective, that was a great example of what we mean by reframing. Reframing is all about you choosing the meaning that you want to attach to something, not letting someone else or some other circumstance dictate what things mean to you. And as athletes and coaches, we are presented on a moment-by-moment basis with the opportunity to constantly reframe. And if you remember, there's two types of reframes. One is what we call a content reframe, such as we're losing at halftime. What does that mean? It means we're going to go on and lose the rest of the game. That's purely content. It's your choice whether losing at halftime equates to losing at full time. Or you can choose to say, "Hey, we've just been taught a really great lesson on how not to play. Let's learn from it. Let's go out and make some corrections and adjustments," which is what the first team did. Now, that's a content reframe. The second type of reframe is what we call a context reframe. And I always refer to my daughter as part of this example. And you'll have players that you can refer to as well, obviously. But a context reframe is where a behavior in one environment or context is really helpful, but in another environment or context is really unhelpful. It's really hard to get our youngest daughter to eat her vegetables, and I hope she watches this video later on in life to know how much grief she put us through. Anyway, we've got her eating a couple now, but the reality is that you can't make her do anything. And we found that to be the experience with her in sport as well, until she decides she wants to do it. But that what we perceive as stubbornness and an unwillingness to please others is actually a really helpful behavior. As she gets older and no doubt gets you know, perhaps society and some of the struggles and challenges that are presented to older people in society, that she'll be able to say no and not feel the need to just go with the peer group. So that stubbornness and that lack of willingness to just want to do things for the sake of pleasing someone else is actually a really helpful behavior when you have to make tough choices in life. And we often talk about this from a disc perspective, where you might have someone who's a high D, who's very good on the court at giving direction, taking authority, taking control, wanting the ball, but takes that behavior off court, where it becomes unuseful when you're trying to choose a restaurant where to go for dinner. And so the inability to adapt, but that's what we mean by a context reframe. So those two things were some of the lessons that came out of 2017, and there are more, and we'll show you another video shortly on some of the other lessons we took from this year.